What's up guys, welcome back to another GGF video review, and today I'll be taking a look at the performance one from Antec. Now as the name states, this is a performance orientated chassis, and this does come with a bunch of included fans, which is nice to see. Now there are some other cool features on this case, like a digital readout at the top here for your CPU and GPU temps. You can cycle between those with a button on the top of the case, and I'll check out that later on in this review. And it does have some pretty nice cable management features around the back. So let's jump in and see what this case is all about.
The Performance One FT being full tower, is an affordable solution from Antec, and it's been a while since we've covered one of their more standard cases, as you've probably noticed some more crazy builds in their Antec Cannon chassis of late. Styling wise it's clean, with nothing over the top. The chassis comes in both black and white, and as you can see, we have the black version. I do like the aesthetic of the front panel, and the dark grey plays nicely with the rest of the case. The panel is held in with magnets and just pops out. The panel also holds a dust filter, which can be cleaned easily. The subtle Antec branding is a nice touch. As I said before, this is a full tower chassis. From recent cases I've used, this is quite small, but still fits into the full tower space, being 8 PCI slots. Dimensions come in at 522 high, 230 wide, and 522 deep. Note the height and width being exactly the same. The Performance One follows a traditional case layout. Nothing fancy going on here, and this is what some people want. PSU at the bottom in the basement with the motherboard and video card above. This is the only layout this case can do, no other rotating configs. Side panels are 4mm thick tempered glass with about a medium tint. They are locked in via a captive thumb screw, and once unlocked they swing out from the top. Foam padding can also be found on the inside of the glass panels. Front I/O can be found at the top along the right side edge of the case, and there's a bit going on here. First, we find these rubber inserts that protect your ports. Whether these are needed or not, it's a nice touch. Just be careful when you remove the top panel on the case, these little covers will go flying. Power and reset buttons are found first, then an audio combo port, 2 USB 3.0 Type A ports, a USB-C 10GB port, and then an interesting temp button. You might be wondering what this actually is or does. Well, Antec have added a hidden screen at the top front of the case, and this temp button changes between CPU and GPU temps. This screen connects via an internal USB header and is then used in conjunction with Antec's iUnity software. I'll go over this more in the outro and let you know if I faced any issues. Around the back of the Performance One, we find some cover panels. We've seen these on cases before, and these are definitely becoming more and more popular. As seen, there is a panel 1 and a panel 2. These are separate, but panel 1 needs to be removed first. Undo the thumb screw at the top, then the 2 screws at the bottom, and slide up. Once panel 1 is out, panel 2 simply slides up as well. This now reveals the complete backside of the case. Plenty of cable routing can be found on the left side with 3 large cable channels with Velcro tie downs. On the far right side, 3 more Velcro tie downs can be found for EPS cables. Stick around for the outro and we'll see just how the cable management went in the finished build. PSU is installed in probably my favourite way, and this is from the back via a bracket. PSU length up to the hard drive cage is about 260mm, with the hard drive cage installed in the closest position to the PSU. With an Antec signature 1000 watt unit installed, there is plenty of room. While we're around the back, let's take a look at storage options. Directly behind the motherboard tray are 3 2.5-inch SSD sleds. In front of the PSU, we find a 3.5-inch hard drive cage. A single hard drive or SSD can be installed in this cage, and a single hard drive or SSD can be installed on top of this cage. This cage also has 2 mounting positions to allow for more radiator room at the front of the chassis. For case ventilation, there's a long removable dust filter at the bottom that runs the entire length of the case, that front panel filter which I mentioned earlier, and the top has a magnetic filter as well. Moving inside the Performance One, I was surprised to see 4 included fans. Now these aren't some fancy RGB fans, as the name states, these are non-RGB performance fans. The 3 at the front are 140s and the rear is a 120, but all 4 fans are 30mm thick. Stats on these fans are impressive, and it's nice to see fans like these included in the case. Motherboard support is up to Aesethics, and surprisingly, I had no issues with 24-pin fitment, even with right angle motherboards. I've used much bigger cases and fitment around this area has been much tighter than this. Cable cutouts can be found all around, with 2 large cutouts at the top for EPS and fans, 2 large grommets at the bottom, while 2 more large grommets can be found on the side for 24-pin and SATA cables, although on this board the SATA cables didn't quite line up. For GPU length, I had 425mm of clearance to the front of the chassis, or 395mm to the included fans, GPU width, there's roughly 165mm, and for CPU cooler height, we find 175mm. Moving on to cooling and radiator support, the top of the PSU shroud has support for 3 120mm fans for additional cooling. This is designed for fans only and not a radiator. The main radiator locations in the Performance One are at the top and the front. The top supports 3 120s or 3 140mm fans or a 360mm radiator max. The top area is roughly 420mm in length, so there is absolutely no way a 420mm radiator is going to fit. One nice feature is the top radiator bracket is removable. Instead of dropping in like other cases, this one detaches from the side, then you lift and slide out. Removable rad brackets always come in handy if you already have a front radiator installed. With the bracket removed, this really opens up the case, and I suggest removing this bracket at the start to help the build process. Top radiator clearance to the motherboard is 65mm. The top radiator bracket is offset closest to the main side panel, allowing radiators to comfortably run past the motherboard. Here I was able to fit an EK-X360M 58mm thick 360 radiator with fans. The front of the case supports 3 120s or 3 140mm fans. We already knew this because the case comes populated with the 3 140s. I do like how you can install fans or radiator on the outside of the front inside the front panel. There's 35mm of clearance here, and I'd most likely use this spot for fans. This now gives us up to 65mm of clearance on the inside to the PSU cutout. Here I was able to fit another EK-X360M radiator on the inside with the fans on the outside. As you can see, I was able to fit 2 EK-X360M radiators with fans. Now this is probably the most extreme scenario for this case. Basically fitting 2 60mm thick radiators in a case this size is not an easy feat, although I do recommend removing the rear fan if going with a thick top rad. Personally, for my build, I'll most likely drop down to 40mm thick radiators all round.
Alrighty guys, now like always, let's check out the final build. So as you can see, I went with a decked out red and black theme. I thought, well, it's all AMD, let's go with a red theme. The motherboard is the ROG Strix B650E-F, and then for the GPU, it's an AMD reference 7900 XTX, and I'll talk a little bit about the build at the end. Now, some other things I wanted to cover or to follow up that I mentioned earlier in the review. The temp display, now it did work, the software installed fine. I didn't mind the iUnity software from Antec. Like, it's something fancy, you can't really do anything, you can't tinker with your system, you can't modify things, which I think is fair enough. It's done by Antec. They're not really going to allow you to dive into and modify your hardware. On the left side, you can see your CPU stats. On the right side, you can see your GPU stats. And then in the middle, you've got your RAM and so on. And then underneath it has storage. Now, I only had my C drive. It's only going to see formatted storage. I didn't have the rest of my drives formatted. And the only issue I did have is every now and then, when it was selected on GPU, it just went blank. It just went to the two lines, like it wasn't picking it up. I will feed that back to Antec to see if the software needs an update or something, but for the CPU side of things, it was showing that all the time. The only thing I could suggest, or can't really for this case, it's already been released, is the button to change between the GPU and the CPU on the screen. I think it's a little bit too far back. I just had, like, my reflexes were going to press the power button, as that was the button closest to the screen, but instead you had to go past the power button, past the reset button, all the way down the end to cycle it from the GPU to the CPU. It just maybe would have made a little bit more sense having a button closer to the screen. Now, rear cable management, I was really impressed with how that all came together. Now, this case to me, I wouldn't say is big. There isn't a whole heap of room around the back. There isn't a heap of room down below. but it all just seemed to work. I really like cases that have these panels, whether it's 1 panel, 2 panel, 3 panels, ones that secure in, not ones that just clip in or just kind of go over the cables. These ones actually worked really well. Now, as you can see, I've left this pretty messy. Please don't judge me. I just left it like this, minimal zip ties and minimal cable management, just to see how it would look once these panels are back on. And it actually does look really good. As you can see, I didn't even secure really all the SATA cables down. I just let them hanging, SATA power hanging, and the 24 pin just running straight down. But overall, the rear cable management, I thought it worked really well. Another thing, you probably might have noticed why I didn't test fit this case with a 420 radiator at the front and a 360 at the top. Well, one, I don't have any 420s at the moment, and secondly, I doubt you would be able to fit a 420 like this and then a 360 up the top, because I just don't think there would be enough room. As you can see, I've got the 360 there and a 360 at the top, and these are very close together, and a 420 is quite a bit bigger altogether on top of this. Now, on some of Antec's product images, I have seen they have a 420 and a 360. I'm not sure if that's correct. You may be able to get away with a super slim 420 at the front and then a 360 at the top, but you might as well just go with 2 beefy 360s, because as you can see, I could get those 2 EK 60mm thick 360s all together. So I just don't think a 420 would fit. No doubt you could get one. So if you did have a 420 all-in-one cooler, you can definitely go with that option if you're just going with one. Now, in terms of res support, I didn't really cover res support. This isn't a case that's really going to be designed for high-end water cooling, so I don't normally cover that in the middle of the review. Options you have on the back here for like an FLT, I've gone with the standard pump res combo from Bitspower. That's just a cylinder res, DDC on the bottom. A DDC is more than enough for a build this size, and that's just secured in by the top here. And then I simply just stuck the base straight on, and that is super, super firm. You can also go with something like res mounts that can fix onto the radiator, that can fix onto the fans and whatnot. But another option you can do for a pump res combo is down the bottom here. You've got heaps of room here. If you're going with a standard GPU layout, you can definitely lie a res down flat, and there's a heap of holes down the bottom here which you can secure it down. Now, vertical GPU support, I didn't cover that because this case doesn't come with any sort of out of the box. It doesn't come with mounting. It doesn't come with its own dedicated bracket or anything. But one thing I do like is it does come, well, it doesn't come, well, it does have built in. When you remove all the PCI slots, it's just one big open hole. If you remember old school cases with the PCI slots, once you remove each one, there is a little bar between each slot. Now, this can conflict your vertical GPU when it comes to the display ports, the HMI ports, because you can't actually fit them in. And in the old days, everyone was cutting those little bridges that went between each slot. So that is completely blank. So if you do go with an aftermarket, say a cable mod vertical riser bracket, it'll fit in there. It just depends on how high it's going to sit. And going by the Antec product images, you should be able to fit your fans underneath as well. Another issue, or another thing I did mention that could be an issue, is I did mention there was a white version. Now, I swear I did see a white version in one of the early sort of teaser videos. I'm pretty sure it was last year. I'll see if I can find it. I think a white version would be really sweet on this case, but as of now, I can't find a white version online about this case. So it would be nice to see a white version, and then on the front, keep that same silver two-tone on the front, and then the whole rest of the case would be white. And that would be really sweet to see. Now, last thing I want to cover is price. Now, the performance one comes in at $160 US, and that's not too bad, I think. I wouldn't say it's super, super budget. It's not super, super high end. I'd say that price is about right. But what I would like to see, I know Antec probably aren't going to like this because they're aiming this towards performance and they want these fans to come with it because they're performance fans. But a lot of people do like their RGB fans, and a lot of people do have their own RGB fans. So people are going to scrap the stock fans, especially what I did, and they're going to go with their own fans. So that's probably $40 of the fans that are included wasted. So if they could drop this price down to say $119 or $129, it would make this case a lot more appealing than what it already is. So that's just my thoughts. I don't know about your thoughts on included fans in cases. I would say they're not garbage fans. They're actually pretty decent fans. They're 30mm thick. They're going to be very, very high performing, but everyone loves their RGB. So regardless of how good something can be, if it's not RGB, people won't want to use it. So yeah, that's just my thought on the included fans. Now moving on to some of the things I did on this build. I didn't do too much. Of course, I went with a red theme. I added some red mirror down the bottom here. I wanted to try and contrast it. You can't really see it at all, but there is red mirror acrylic down there. And then I did paint the red as well to match the rest of the aesthetic. Now in terms of hardware, I mentioned the motherboard before, the GPU. The CPU is the AMD 7900X3D, so that's a bit of a beast there. And with this GPU, this is going to be a nice little gaming rig. And then we have Bitspower water cooling all around. Now I really do like these Bitspower CPU blocks. That's the M Pro, and it just looks really nice with that little chrome around the edge. And then we have the Bitspower, this is the 7900XTX GPU block. And one thing I did swap is I swapped the reference AMD block backplate with the stock one that came on the Bitspower block. I just think it looked better in this build, and as you can see, it just adds a little bit more of an aggressive look than the stock Bitspower one that just looks like a bit of a cheese grater. This one has a few decals on it. It's got a bit of color, and it just adds to the overall look of the build. And then I just went with some frosted tubing all around, and then the red coolant. But yeah, that's pretty much it on the Performance One review. Overall, a nice little case. I think it's going to do well. Obviously, it's got the airflow, it's got down the bottom, it's got at the front, it's got at the top, and then you do get those included fans. Whether or not you'll use the fans, I guess that's up to you. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I want to thank Antec for sending this out, and I'll see you in the next one.